Hey y'all,
We are
hey, we are
back.
on for another episode.
Listen, the struggle is real. We're back for another episode of Relationship Topia, where we talk about all things relationship with God, the creator, relationship with yourself. And that encompasses so much, right? Not just self love, not just self care, that so much. And then relationship with others. So we are on the second part of making the right choice. And after Jill gives a breakdown of what we talked about last time and do an introduction, all that stuff, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be talking about tonight. You want to tune in. Make sure you have your notepad. Make sure you have your pen. Listen, we are spilling the tea on tonight, and we also want you to be engaged in the conversation. So you all should be leaving us comments, sending us notes, providing your feedback, your experiences, all of that jazz. Because in 2025, we are going to be inviting some of you on the podcast to just join in the discussion, right, Joe?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. Oh my God. So last time was a great conversation and really just opening the door, opening the conversation up about making the right choice. And we was like, what do we want to call this? It's going to be like making the right choice, mating to date. Like, what is this conversation scope? And so the conversation scope is definitely making the right choice. And we talked about that in the last episode. And specifically, we were talking about what constitute. Well, I don't even want to say constitute. We talked a little bit about different definitions of a high value man, high value versus low functioning. And we also talk about high value woman versus low functioning woman. And I'm not even going to say there's a universal agreed upon definition. We talked about Kevin Samuels, relationship expert, and his perspective on it. Also, Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, a little bit about her perspective with this whole high functioning thing. So what we have agreed that there is no universal definition for high value and even high functioning. However, there are some things that we all have heard when it comes to high value. And usually that has something to do with status and usually has something to do with income, influence, and the like, and looks, unfortunately, which we talked about was all superficial things. So if you missed it, go back and watch it. Now, I'm not saying that money and all of that doesn't matter, because even the word of God tells us that money answers all things. So we absolutely understand the importance of financial stability and all the things. How sometimes we just get off. So again, if you missed it, you need to listen. Don't collect $200 on pass. Go none of that. You need to go back to that episode and check it out and get that, because this is going to understand as we move forward here. But even if you haven't, you still be okay here, because today we're going to be getting into not only dealing with high function, low function, and high value and all of that. We want to talk about environmental factors influences our decision as we're trying to make a choice, as we're navigating, whether it's relationship space for others, maybe you're already married for others, and maybe you're transitioning wherever you are. We're talking about based on what has influenced your decisions to this point. And if you have to make future choices, like what's impacting your decisions, and not only your decisions, and making the right choice, but also your decisions and how you show up, and even what you tolerate in a relationship. So that we just going to go all in on it. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let me just try to help you understand when I talk about environmental factors, what we're going to be talking about specifically. You're like, okay, environmental factors, girl, what you talking about? So when you talk about when you talk about environmental factors, this could be everything from family dynamics. Your family dynamics absolutely positively is going to affect and impact how you move in the relationship space and how you select a partner. Your cultural background is going to also have an influence. Peer pressure, right? Depending on what your friends saying they want and do. And I get it, because I be hearing these ladies and their standards, and I be like, man, is my standards too low? Like, what's the deal? Because the high standards sometimes, like the outrageous standards, sometimes we seem like they winning out in these streets. So, that is going to influence you. And I know there's been a lot of talk about, a man needs to be paying all the bills and a man needs to, all the things. So that's a whole big conversation that's happening. And that could have pressure on you, whether you're single or married, about what you're doing in your relationship. I'm not stating my opinion about it either way. So hear me and hear me clearly. However, what I am saying is that's the type of pressure I'm talking about, whether it's from peers, your friends, what they're doing, what they're allowing, what they're not allowing, absolutely influences you, even with their opinion and their preferences. Just the power of suggestion is so powerful. When people suggest things or say something, could definitely influence you. And another thing is the social economic status can be an impact and influence. And let's talk about even your own personal development of how you've moved, what books you've read, what audios and what podcasts you're listening to. We got to stop acting as if our ears and our eyes aren't a gateway to our soul. And our soul is our mind, our will, and our emotions. So if you're listening to anything, it has the potential to have influence over what you do, over how you think. And I feel like today we act so insensitive to that. We act so ignorant to that, for the lack of a better word, that the things we listen to, the people we listen to, influences our decisions. We can choose to not listen to them, and sometimes we will take their advice or whatever the case. But even at a subconscious level, the words they spoke is in our mind, and we have to decide to either filter that information, recycle that information, get rid of that information, do something with it. It's just, if you heard it, it has to go somewhere. So hopefully you're understanding what I'm saying. But all of that, those things that you're doing that affect your personal development, is shaping your beliefs, your behavior, and absolutely is impacting how you show up in your relationships. So sis, you have to tell us a little bit about some examples and more detail about these environmental factors and how we show up and how it impacts us as we move in these relationship streets.
Yeah, absolutely. And good introduction, Jill. And, as you were talking, I was just thinking about the work that I did for my dissertation. Actually, I talked a lot about family dynamics, and I just thought about that literally. We were talking about, I talked about this family dynamics and cultural dynamics and how that really shaped individuals in a marital relationship and how it influenced either the relationship to thrive or, unfortunately, the relationship to fail. And a lot of my research, the body of my research, really talked about submission and the impact of submission, being mutual submissive in the marriage relationship, and even where that thought, right, comes from. So you were saying, like, no one just wakes up and say, okay, this is who I am, right? No one goes through life and you just so happen to be this way. You just so happen to like these type of things. You so happen to be attracted to these type of individuals. We have to understand that shared attraction or shared value or influence came from somewhere. Whether it was our parents, whether it was, our neighbors, whether it was a couple, from our school environment and our home front and things of that nature. I used to often talk about, the influences that I saw around me, from the relationship with mom and dad to the relationships that I saw with my friends and their parents' relationships, and even our neighbors' relationships, right? Just talking about that, all three of those dynamics, if you would, were very, very different. So my family had a certain dynamic. My best friend's family, her mom and dad had a certain dynamic. Our next door neighbor right across the street from us, their mom and dad, right, had a different dynamic. And here we had three couples that were married, and they all had different environmental influences and different environmental dynamics. So when we look at the family dynamics, right, we're looking at a high functional individual versus a low functional individual, a high value versus low value, however we want to, compare or contrast that. The last time I talked about, just someone who's desirable and things of that nature. So an example of that would be a high functioning individual raised in a critical household, a household where their parents are very critical, mom and or dad or siblings even very critical, and that may develop low self-esteem in that individual despite achieving external success, but they continue to work toward a level of success because they want to feel accepted, they want to feel loved, they want to feel included and things of that nature. Let me say this before we go on. This conversation may not be directly for you, but I guarantee you that you can relate to someone that may be experiencing this. You may see some patterns of behavior or some themes in other your friends' relationship or your siblings' relationship and things of that nature. So we're sharing this. It may not directly be for you, but I'm willing to bet that you know somebody that's in this type of dynamic of a relationship, and they can definitely, benefit from this advice that we're sharing today. So when we look at, again, environmental influences as it pertains to the family dynamic, we want to look at like how family expectations, how that can create pressure and lead to emotional unavailability, right? How does that create the pressure in someone's life, in their relationship status, and how that may lead to that person being emotionally unavailable within that dynamic of that relationship. So first thing is high standards, right? So when we look at a critical environment per se, or environment that just has high standards for their son or their daughter, families may set these high expectations for a certain level of success. And this often equates to love and approval. So what happens is that the individual, again, will try to continue to strive for, they feel pressure to achieve, they feel pressure to prioritize external accomplishments over emotional connection. So we may see that as far as a family dynamic. It's not anything the family, I don't believe, intentionally did, but it's just how the family dynamic is set up. And because the family dynamic is set up that way, this individual now feels pressure to be an overachiever. You ever met someone that says, I'm an overachiever, I like to reach the pinnacle of success, or I keep going after this thing or that thing? I'm not saying everybody that says that fall in this category, but a lot of times they probably do. The second thing is fear of disappointment. Fear of disappointment. So individuals may become emotionally unavailable as a defense mechanism, fearing that they will disappoint their family if they show vulnerability or struggle. So again, we're talking about how family dynamics will impact or will influence that individual. Fear of disappointment in the mate that they select. They may be extremely attracted to someone that may not be the ideal person that their family would approve of, because they don't have these 5, qualities or attributes. But because they may feel that this person may not be a qualifier or accepted by the family, they have this fear of disappointing. And a lot of times you see individuals will choose a mate that they don't necessarily like, or I would say not that they don't like, they don't have that strong attraction for that individual, but it's kind of like, okay, I can settle for this person because my family approves. And I've seen that over and over and over again. Some of those marriages last, some of those marriages don't last. Another thing under family dynamics is the communication styles, right? So rigid family communication patterns can lead to difficulties in an individual being able to express their emotions. And this is putting me back to our conversation about attachment styles, right? Because this is talking about how the family dynamic, when the family dynamic is so rigid and so harsh and so critical, how this impacts the person's ability to show up emotionally, how it impacts their ability to be emotionally vulnerable, right? So when you have those harsh, rigid communication patterns that are flowing within that family dynamic, this leads to the individual being unable or having a very hard time being able to express their emotions. And if emotional expression is discouraged, individuals can learn to suppress their feelings, resulting in emotional unavailability in relationships, right? Because every time they express their feelings in the past, they were scorned, they were punished, they were dismissed, they were rejected, and things of that nature. Another family dynamic could be the role of
And
comparison.
and
Can
before
you
you
hear
go
me?
any further, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, a little
Can you hear
choppy, but I
me?
can hear it. A little bit choppy, but I can hear.
Okay. So what I was going to say is, when it comes to the family dynamic, this will break down what you're describing to also can, and I hate to use the N word because everybody hates the N word, breed narcissistic tendencies, because behind that, if you're talking about low self-esteem, that's what's behind narcissism. And it teaches that person to kind of hide their true identity, and they have to create this false persona for acceptance because there's so much expectation of greatness and perfection within the family unit. So you need to take a look and see if that's how your family is moving or has moved, and see how it has impacting you. So I just wanted to put that out there. A lot of people, like I said, kind of hate the N word because it has such a negative connotation. And I believe it's very much understood. And one day we get to talk about that. But I just wanted to sidebar that as you're having a conversation, talking about the family dynamics and how that can give rise to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hence why they may choose or desire a certain mate, because these things impact personality, right? It impacts how you're showing up. It impacts how you're engaging, how you're able to communicate, how you're able to connect. Your entitlement. It can impact your ability to feel entitled or privileged to have certain relationships or to be with certain people in certain dynamics as well. So that's great stuff. Thanks for the add-in, Jill. And the last thing I want to share under the family dynamics, if you would, is just the role of comparison. We see that now. Constant comparison to siblings. A lot of people, unfortunately, grew up in homes where they were constantly compared to their siblings or constantly compared to their peers. And this leads to feeling of inadequacy, right? Causing individuals to distance themselves emotionally and to cope in other ways. And a lot of times those ways are unhealthy. So there's a lot of pressure that are placed on individuals, from young childhood to young adulthood, and even in adulthood, right? Because even as adults, those of us that are in adult age, there's peer pressure, right? We're talking about social media influence, maybe this episode or the next, but there are so many things that are pressuring us to conform or to behave in a certain way. And all of those things will influence you and influence your makeup of how you're able to show up in relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good stuff. That definitely all has an impact. Trail, did you want to go into cultural background or did you want me to tap into that?
Yeah, I can definitely go into cultural background. So again, just talking about how these things influences that person to be said, high value, low value, or even selecting someone of high value or low value standards, or a desirable mate, or the mate that they select in general. Because again, this is making the right choice. So individuals are making the right choice based on all of these things that we're talking about on tonight. So cultural background, for an example, in some cultures, they may prioritize traditional gender roles. Again, this is something else that I talked about during my work, my study. So they may differentiate gender roles, and it's very clear and defined of who does what. So high value individuals may struggle with balancing personal ambition and societal expectation. They may have a desire to, let's say a wife, for instance, or a woman, for instance, may have a desire to submit to her husband, because when we talk about submission, is normally in the area of wife submitting to husband, but we all know that there is a mutual submission as well. So, she may have a desire to submit, but then she may also have pressure from society telling her not to submit, telling her, to embrace and embody her feminism, and she's powerful and all of the things too. And while all of those things are true, there still has to be some type of balance, and they have to come into some type of agreement. However, but if culture is a more of an influence, and this individual will have a hard time being able to balance within that relationship dynamic. So let's look at the impact, right, of culture norms on these relationship dynamics, and how that impacts emotions as well. So when we look at that, again, gender roles, right? So while many cultures do have, men do the work outside, women are to stay home and take care of the children, this can cause an imbalance, because you may have either individuals that are desiring to please their partner and desiring to assist in the way that their partner needs. But if they have, I don't want to say, I would say challenge, a challenge background as far as what their parents did, what their grandparents did, what they saw, what they deem is correct and right, this is going to create difficulty within that relationship. And individuals have to be able to see, it's okay for you to look at your family dynamic and look at cultural dynamics and identify with certain things. But when it comes to the point of these things invading your thought process or overpowering what you would otherwise do, this could create challenges for you, as a person looking for a mate, or if you're already in a relationship, right? There's also collectivism versus individualism, right? So in collectivist cultures, family and communities may take precedence over individual desires, leading to pressure to conform to those traditional relationship structures. Again, it's kind of like the gender roles. Regardless of what you feel or what you think or what you believe in, your culture and your family and your community is going to take precedence, right? So that's what you're going to that's who you're going to look to in order to influence you. And what happens with this is that this can stifle your growth. It can also stifle your ability to connect emotionally with individuals and things of that nature. And the last one I want to share, Jill, is taboos around vulnerability, right? So certain cultures, certain ethnic groups may stigmatize emotional vulnerability, making it very difficult for individuals to express their feelings openly, which also can hinder relationship intimacy and connection. So, and again, if an individual is in this place, this makes it very difficult from them to be in connection with the opposite sex, to be able to create a healthy and authentic relationship, a dynamic. They get into relationships and they don't talk about certain things. Certain things are hidden, certain things are not discussed, certain things are suppressed because that's what they were used to doing, right? They're not used to expressing themselves and being vulnerable and being open and being authentic. They think something is wrong with that. They think it's a negative when it comes to the relationship. So all these things impact, and they can negatively influence your ability to make the right choice and be in a healthy dynamic of a relationship.
My God, as you were speaking, what came to me is the truth of the matter is, unfortunately, sometimes I'm going to use the term low functioning. Parents can teach their children to be low functioning. So if you have a parent and your parents have some, I don't know what you want to call it, toxic, unhealthy, unproductive things that you don't like about them, those things that you don't like about your parent may be some level of low functioning, as they would say in psychology, and generational curse, as we would say in the spiritual world. And you get to look at that because sometimes you can be perpetuating the same cycle. Like Trey, you're talking about like suppressing that emotion and not feeling. Some families and mothers have taught their children, mothers teach sons and daughters, but it's even worse for the sons. It really both is bad for both, whether they teach the sons or daughters that being vulnerable is a sign of weakness, sharing a feeling, sign of weakness, not crying, all of these things to not express emotions. And we will continue to echo that expressing your emotions is absolutely necessary and needed. Like you can't even be in a healthy relationship without expressing your emotions and feelings. Like it just ain't gonna happen. So I just wanted to add that, and that was coming to me of how parents, through even showing demonstration, you see that. Another thing that you didn't mention that I think about when you talk about cultural background, we also have to think about, I think in terms of ethnicity, and I think about like different cultures, whether that's somebody maybe from African culture, like Nigeria or Liberia, or even certain regions within the United States. All of these type of cultural influences can also impact. I know in some, I'll just pick on the African culture. No, I'm not trying to be racist because it's prevalent in a lot of races, but they're saying, okay, a lot of times it's been known that men in Africa, you come from families where their fathers may have had multiple women and had brought children outside the home into the wife's home. You have to talk through that about what their value is and what their value lies. And just like speaking on that, and honestly going into the peer pressure, because I feel like that peer influence is also going to kind of also bounce off of the cultural background, because when you talk about like the peer influence, these are your people, your friends, and the people that are around you can be also pressuring or otherwise influencing how you move in relationship. And whether it's a friend or a family member can be pressuring you or otherwise influencing how you move in a relationship. Earlier, I had mentioned there's this thing that a man needs to pay for everything. A woman don't go 50-50. That's a whole big thing right now, movement that's been fuming online about not going 50-50. But I'm thinking, if you're in a relationship and you and your partner have already had a situation where y'all been going 50-50, and then on day 1,002, you wake up
have an epiphany
and say, I'm no longer going 50-50, we're going 100-0. And that partner don't believe in that belief, It's a saying that says, and these cliches and things be lasting for a long time because they're true. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So we have to be careful about how we allow what the Joneses are doing, the Kardashians are doing, and whoever else, because many of them who are doing ain't necessarily making it and thriving in the States. And I'm not saying it's because somebody don't thrive or have relationships where whether it's a divorce or break up. I'm not saying that they cannot add value to the conversation, because they can add a lot of value to the conversation. But what I am saying is we don't want to be so enamored and allow what other people are doing and adopting those mindsets and values as our own. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about having a thriving relationship, there's 2 points that's like needs to be the core cornerstone of your relationship. And you can't allow peer influence, culture, background, family influences or dynamics to trump this thing, which is really focusing on what is the emotional connection that we have. How are we connected, like heart to heart, right? And not only that, that's like one big piece of it. And another big piece of it is that spiritual piece. And there's so much that can be said about this. And I'm not saying, how can I say, oh God.
Why, Jill? I want you to talk. Jill, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about that, but I wonder why the peer influence, because this is really a big one right now. Why the peer influence is such a huge thing right now. You know, the social circles, if you would. Why are people being so drawn? Like you said, you can be married and your spouse had, an agreement for 20 years. And then you wake up one day after watching 5 podcasts or whatever, and now you feel empowered or you feel indifferent toward your spouse. And now you're wanting to change the dynamic, of that relationship. Why do you think that is? Why do you feel like people are easily swayed? Do you think that it's because they always wanted to be that way and then they just got empowered by somebody? Or do you think that, what do you think about that? I just want to talk about that for a minute.
A couple of things. I think definitely this whole concept of the fear of missing out. If you have a friend that is spouse is paying for everything or whatever the case may be, and you may be checking numbers. I don't know if you're checking numbers or you just having a casual conversation, but in either case, you may have some type of idolizing or desire for that same thing and feel like, oh, well, why did I sign up for 50-50 when I can get 100 and 0? Not understanding. You got to understand, one, how you came in a relationship, and 2, the type of person that you're with. So we can't just try to change midstream. You got to understand your situation, and you got to be in agreement. Because the word of God says, how can 2 walk together unless they agree? So at the beginning and the end, this is why emotional is important. And this is why spiritual is important. I feel like sometimes people get so caught up. And I will come back to your question, Carol. But I feel like we get so caught up on spiritual and this person being a super Christian and all of this. That's point out to the point that y'all have the same shared values and beliefs. Because some 2 believers and y'all don't have to share values and beliefs. And that's really in part why spiritual is important. Also the fear of the Lord and some other things I'm not going to get into today. But those things are really what matters in a relationship. So to get back to your question, sis, it's that the fear of missing out. It's all the comparison that's on social media. And people so much people are posting about the highlight reels of their life. And no shame, I'm sure I've been guilty of it as well, which is just posting the best moments, posting the parties, posting the vacation, posting the dates, posting this, posting that, whatever the case may be. And when that happens, people see one thing, and now the reality a lot of times is distorted. And so sometimes we're chasing a false image. We're chasing a false thing that's not even real. I mean, social media and AI, all this stuff, you can create whatever you want, but we take everything as face value. One of the things my mom said, and I just take it with me everywhere, and I'm sure you've heard of this, believe none of what you hear and have what you see. Like today, that's more relevant than ever before. Everything you see is not what it is. And don't make the great mistake of getting so caught up with what you see. We gotta, sometimes, look, if you see yourself being like, ooh, I want that, or feeling envious, jealous, or even desiring, so let's use the I word, inspired, because sometimes that inspiration could be bad. It's inspiring you to want something that you otherwise wouldn't want, or do something you otherwise wouldn't have done. And like I said, a lot of times we're trying to hold ourselves to a standard either that's fake and or that the top 1% is holding. And it's just not realistic for the everyday person. And it creates a lot of stress on you as an individual, can create a lot of stress on your partner. And at the end of the day, the thing that's important is that emotional, that spiritual connection is not being fostered because you're sitting out here chasing a pipe dream. And so we get to take a step back and say, hold on, what is it that I really want? What really matters? And how they say, I don't know about for you. Yeah, as for me in my house, we go serve the Lord. And as for me in my house, we're going to be about integrity. For me in my house, we're going to be about fostering an environment of nurturing, of vulnerability, of empathy. You know, we're going to, for me in my house, we're going to be fostering an environment of, giving attention, giving compliments, not competing, but complimenting and supporting one another. And so you have to really start to say, what really do I need? What is it that I want? And what is it going to take for me to be the best version of me? What do I need this person to pour into me? And what do I want to pour into this other person? The stuff that we be worried about, their height, like, I don't know how somebody's height is going to add to the quality of how this person treats you. I mean, it's nice. God bless it. I agree. This is all great, but that's not going to add to the value of how this person treats you. And that's really where we get to be. And like I said, that's for me in my house. That's how we move it. And so we have to get to that place to really get to a place, say what really is important and move from there.
That's good. And we're going to table this discussion because there's a lot to talk about and it's a lot to unpack. And really what I was hearing you saying with all of that is you and your partner have to have your own shared value system. You and your partner have to have your boundaries in place so that even when you do look at these videos or whatever it is that is trying to reshape you or trying to influence you to go against the grain, if you would, you have to be so settled and set in what you and your partner have already established, and even your own values. So whereas you're not easily deviated or deterred from your truth and from your value system. So we will be having a further conversation, maybe part, what is this, 2 till 4, about your eye gaze and your ear gaze, just protecting those things to ensure that when you do see Love is Blind or, these other shows and things that people watch, and really limiting a lot of the things. Sometimes we just need to limit and shut off certain things and certain people, not like cut off, but just shut off the advice that you're getting. So many people in your head, so many voices from social media and other people. Sometimes you just really need to do a detox and cleanse or really get back to your true value system. So I'm going to leave with this, Joe. I just want to ask the audience, check your value system. What are your 3 top core values about relationships, about dating, marriage, and things of that nature? Hold true to those things and don't allow influences to deviate you from that, whether it's cultural, whether it's family dynamic, whether it's peer pressure. And we'll talk about some more on next week. Just hold true to who you are so that you're not easily swayed and persuaded by everything that, is in front of your eye view, or things that you were exposed to growing up. So yeah, so that's it. That's all.
That's good. So that's a wrap for tonight, you guys. Well, thanks so much for joining. If you guys haven't already, make sure you share this. Comment. Share this broadcast on whatever platform you're on. Come back and see us every Sunday, 5 p.m., 5:05 p.m. on Sunday Eastern Standard Time. 5-ish. Usually by 5:05 is where it goes live. So any rate, but yeah, Eastern Standard Time, be there or be square. Until next time, we'll see you. Peace and blessings. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.